Welcome back to What You're Reading Wednesdays. Thanks for tuning in and spending time with us. Today, we're traveling. Well, not really, but the cool thing about books is that you can travel through the power of stories without leaving your house. What's your favorite book that took place in an interesting destination?
I think the most interesting place that I can remember reading about was Hogwarts, and it doesn't technically exist. But you can travel to the country that it takes place in, so I'm counting that as a win.
One of the first chapter books I remember reading as a child were my folks' Tom Clancy's spy fiction. So from a pretty young age, I was exposed to The Hunt for Red October, that sort of 1980s techno spy thriller sort of situation. So I got really into reading about Russia. It's the book that inspired me, for better or worse, to study Russian in college and Russian literature and all that good stuff. And, as you'll find out later, eventually go there and work for a bit. And
I read the book called The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek recently, and that one's set in the Appalachian Mountains. So I like the descriptions of the mountains and the trails and the creeks and all those scenic things. So I thought that would be an interesting place to visit. I had never visited there before. I also have a little tie to that because I had a great uncle who was from that area, and he was basically a hillbilly. That's what they called him. So he had lots of stories and things to tell about what they did when they were kids and stuff. So that also makes me interested in visiting that area.
have you ever checked out the Foxfire Project?
I have not checked that out.
Okay, so that's a group of historians and folks who work with oral history from the Appalachian area. It's really cool, where they really work to document the Appalachian culture and the songs and the art and the customs and all that good stuff, because it's kind of one of those underserved parts of the United States. It's really worth checking out. It's online, and there's actually a book coming out about it this year.
So I read Captured by Beverly Jenkins. It was actually set in Martinique, which is an island off the coast of St. Lucia. It was a really good book. I enjoyed it. I ended up later going to Martinique, which I thought was really cool. It actually inspired me to actually go to the place. And it was a historical romance book. So African-American culture and being descendants of slaves, that kind of thing. It was just really cool just kind of seeing that kind of all together.
So last summer I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is now a series on Hulu, and it's set in Ireland. And just the setting itself, with the accents and everything, kind of lends itself to these two characters' relationship and the struggles that they go through. But also another book I read is called Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And she also has a book called Circe, which I read, which I really liked. And both are about figures from ancient Greek mythology.
I picked Where the Crawdads Sing. I think that was one of the top Overdrive books last year, if I remember right. Yeah, so the place is very much central to the story. It takes place in North Carolina, the coastal area. It talks about the marsh. The author, Delia Owens, is actually a zoologist, and it's very much poetry and science put together in just very descriptive language, and just really makes you want to go to a coastal town on the shore.
Since most of the books I read are fantasy or they're comics and manga, I read Ninth House last year by Leigh Bardugo, and that takes place in Connecticut, Yale. And I don't know, just kind of the descriptions and stuff were kind of interesting. It's more of a supernatural occult kind of fiction, which I think is interesting, but the way they described the area seemed pretty interesting, and I've never been to the East Coast before.
I forgot that I read Beartown and super enjoyed it. And it's set in the Scandinavian area of the world, and that's like top of my list to get to like before I'm dead. And it wasn't even so much like the landscape and the picture that he painted there, but just like the storytelling of like the people.
Have you ever traveled somewhere after reading a book about that particular location?
I'm very well traveled, so yes, I have traveled to a lot of places after I've read the book. Or when I was living in Germany, definitely it was very easy to travel to France and Poland and those kinds of different places just because they were just literally right there. Switzerland. One of the places I traveled, though, that I really enjoyed was India. And I read a lot of now in the contemporary romance genre, there's a lot of Indian authors from India, which is really, really cool.
After I visit a place, I do like to read about it later. But as a child, I really liked the book Heidi. And so I was in Switzerland about 5 years ago with some cousins and my sister, and we went through Switzerland, and you saw those big green open areas. You saw the big mountains in the back. You saw the little beautiful cows with their big wide brown eyes. It was beautiful. It was very beautiful. So it was kind of fun because it kind of reinforced what the story had told. It was exactly that way.
Well, as you all know, I read manga, and I did get to go to Japan last year, and got to go to Tokyo and like the little districts there. So like seeing some of the places that a lot of stories will like actually put the characters in. It's like, oh, you know, it's like I've been there before.
Like I said, a lot of my more inspired traveling was due to an inescapable love of kind of trashy 80s spy fiction. So I had the opportunity to travel to Russia when I was in college, which was a really good time. Lots of time around the Moscow and St. Petersburg areas. But we got to travel to Pushkin. And that's important to me because Pushkin is one of my favorite authors and poets. So to be able to travel to like a little village just named after him, it's also the site of like the Winter Palace and all that good stuff was incredible. If you haven't read Eugene Onegin, get on it. It's a great piece of classic Russian literature that's not as dark and long and winded as like Tolstoy or Turgenev. So
I really haven't traveled anywhere after I've read a book, but last year my family and I went to Argentina, and I haven't read any South American authors yet, but I aspire to in the future.
So sort of by accident, and something I literally just realized in this recording, was that I read two books in a series, a contemporary romance series. The first one was the Bromance Book Club, and then the follow-up was Undercover Bromance, and those are actually, I forget until now, set in Nashville. And yes, a good chunk of us went there for a Public Library Association conference in February before everything got shut down. So I didn't travel to Nashville, obviously, because I read the books, but I did read them pretty much right before going. So that was kind of fun, and I forgot about it.
Where do you most dream of traveling? Would you read a book set in that destination before traveling there?
I would like to revisit Sweden. I was there a few years ago, but I would really like to go up to the northern part of Sweden in Lapland. I would like to see the Northern Lights. That's my biggest thing. I'd also.
So like you, Mary, I hope to go to those German-speaking countries, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, because I am a large percent German.
I haven't yet been to Germany either, and I actually had plans with the friends to go there later this year. I know, amazing culture. Like to, you know, my old German teacher, Haley, still lives in the area, so I could get a good tour going, Oktoberfest, all that good stuff.
Well, if I was to pick some place I've never been, probably someplace in Europe. I think I've always kind of wanted to go to Germany as well, maybe France.
And I want to actually go to where Justine's gone to. I really want to go to Japan, Okinawa. I love Asian culture. I love Asian food. I know, I just love it. Like, so yeah, I definitely want to go in that direction.
I'm going to hop on the bandwagon too with the heritage thing. So Germany would be my pick as well. My husband's family is also Icelandic, so Iceland would be another place I've heard is really beautiful.
So like internationally, I would obviously, if we're like sticking to like heritage, even though we don't have to, where I do really want to go is like Norway. I read last year a book. It was nonfiction, but it wasn't true crime for once. It's called Next Level Basic, and it's by a reality TV star, and I'm not ashamed of that. But she is from the New Orleans area, and she is into like the same crazy macabre stuff that I'm into, and she had a chapter like dedicated to that, and she talked about the Museum of Death. It sounds like a place that would unfortunately just really make my soul happy. So that's one thing I've read about a destination that I have just so quickly added to my list of places to visit.
If someone wants to quote unquote travel while staying safe at home right now, what might be your top book recommendation?
If there's any book in your to be read pile, read that book that you've always wanted to read. And if it takes you on a mystical, magical carpet ride, like in Aladdin, then, you know, take it from there.
Okay, well, I read The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and it is set in Alaska. So it has a lot of good description about what Alaska is like, and it's a place I've never been to, so I would like to go there. It's also a great book, so it's something I would definitely recommend to people. Another book I read was called At the Edge of the Orchard by Tracy Chevalier, and it is, some of it's set in Ohio, but then one of the son moves and he starts to be very interested in the giant redwoods and the sequoia trees in California. So a lot of it takes place during the formation of that big national park there and stuff.
I got two of them. One, because I want to kind of push my agenda of spy fiction. And this is very underrated, but it was turned into one of my favorite 1980 films starring Walter Matthau. It's called Hopscotch. And it's about a guy who decides to leave the CIA, and one could say it leads them on a wild goose hunt to try to find him. It's a good time. He hops scotches all over the place. It's just delightful. My other one is for more domestic, because I have a huge, ever-burning love for the national park system. And sometimes they don't get the respect they deserve. This book is called Death in Yellowstone. It's a nonfiction book documenting all of the people who have died in Yellowstone and how. And it's can be pretty grisly. I mean, the first chapter is people who have like literally just died in the hot springs. But it doesn't deviate from like the beauty that is the actual park and like the treachery of nature. It's really good.
Any fantasy book you pick up, you know, it doesn't matter which one, you're going to be traveling.
Lately, when I've been going out walking, we live out in the country, out on nature walks. Do you ever think like what happened here 100 years ago? You know,
Yes.
This place was here.
Yes.
What happened on this ground? I think it's early 1900s, Minnesota, North Dakota, this blizzard where it was like a 60, 70 degree day in the spring, and all of a sudden it turned into a blizzard. And the stories are of kids running from the country schoolhouses trying to go home, and nobody has their coat with them or anything. And there were hundreds of children. It was like the children's blizzard that were killed out on the prairie.
Ooh.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah,
What is the title of the book?
Sad.
the children's blizzard.
Oh.
Time traveling.
Exactly.
Untraveling.
Yep.
Another one that I would suggest is the Wayward Children series by Seanan Mcguire. They're just little itty bitty books. There's 5 in the series already. It's definitely like science fiction. These worlds don't technically exist, but the way that she writes them and builds them in each book is at least one different world. It's like you feel like they're real. You feel like you're there.
As you've probably noticed, we're a group with diverse reading interests. For the next episode, we want to challenge ourselves to step outside of our comfort zones and try something new. So, I've assigned each person to state 3 genres they rarely read, and we're going to vote which genre they're challenged to try. Oh, Arnessa, what are 3 genres you don't normally read?
So here we go. I have manga, I have YA, and I have historical. Who's for YA? Manga. 1,
Me.
2. Historical. Hostess with the mostest. Break the tie.
I'm going to go with historical.
Oh, I knew it. Ah!
It's the most different to what you read.
I think you should read Michael Shara's The Killer Angels.
Killer ain't. Ooh.
I'm Erin. I usually read schlocky sci-fi or spy fiction and a lot of nonfiction. So 3 genres I don't read are romance, westerns, or contemporary fiction. Who thinks I should read a romance book? Okay. Oh, God.
I am a big fan of Christina Lauren, and they have a lot of stuff on Overdrive. If I were to suggest something for you to start with, Love in Other Words, because it's not like heavy romance, or probably Roomies. So the first one is poetry. The next one is sci-fi. I was really hoping I wouldn't pull that one. Oh boy. And the third one is self-help / inspirational. Are there any votes for poetry? Sci-fi. Self-help.
The other 3.
I'm going to go with sci-fi.
If you want to go classic, John Brunner's The Shockwave Rider was one that my thesis advisor suggested to me, and I loved it.
Okay, so my 3 are similar to yours. I have self-help, true crime, and poetry. All in favor of self-help for Audrey. True crime.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Landslide.
No
Landslide.
poetry.
No
No
poetry.
poetry.
What if there's a book that I want to read? Is that
What
not
is-
a challenge?
What is it?
It's the Michelle.
Read it.
McNamara.
Michelle
Yeah,
McNamara.
McNamara book.
If you don't
Yep.
read hers, go for The Stranger Beside Me.
Mm.
Okay. Mary.
Okay, I have manga, and I put sci-fi and fantasy in the same category, and I put self-help. Okay, so manga,
I think
Yep.
3.
No, 4. Justine, obviously.
we can
Right.
sense
Justine's
it.
definitely right. We know
So we
Justine
don't
voted
even have
from
to
us.
vote anymore then, huh?
Mm-mm.
I'll think of a couple.
Yeah, let me know.
All right. Justine, let's hear your 3.
All right, so I got romance, western, and contemporary.
So Justine could technically knock out 2 of these with a contemporary romance.
Justine, you could read Red, White, and Royal Blue.
I'll take that one.
Ooh.
Oh,
That one, I
Yeah.
actually, yes, I'll do that.
Yeah, I LOL'd the whole time.
So fantasy, true crime, or poetry. Fantasy, true crime, poetry.
I'm going to go with fantasy.
Oh!
Oh!
Read the Wayward Children series.
I was gonna say that.
That was my introduction to it. It's by Seanan Mcguire.
Or my current favorite fantasy comfort read is The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett, which is
yes.
available as an audiobook.
Ooh, Terry Pratchett.
Now that we've got our assignments for next week, that about wraps up this episode of Whatcha Readin' Wednesdays. Thanks for joining us. As always, let us know if you have specific requests or topic ideas. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Stay well, stay home. Stay curious. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.